once done, so now you have a better understanding of in your risk register. You have started filling columns. So now you have done the probability column and the impact column, and so now it's you have come to a point. What are the risk response that you can do? What are the risk and what are the responses that you can do to minimize the impact of these risks? So let's go on to the general discussion of it. Basically, so in negative terms of risks. So basically, there are four risk responses basically that is available. One is to avoid. So basically, if there's a high risk and a high probability and a high impact of doing of an activity, then of course the best thing is to avoid, because it might be touching your risk tolerance level, and which is beyond that your comfort zone. So and this is best is to avoid things happening going into that direction. Sometimes the low stuff, the low probability and very low level risks, low probability happening, and even if that occurred, is a very low financial impact to us. Then of course those risks you might accept as a project manager or as the stakeholders. You might accept those risks. Okay, if it happens, we bear that cost. If that cost increases, we bear that cost. Just about $100 cost impact to the entire costing of the project. So let it go. Don't waste off your time of controlling that. Then there are certain risks that are low probability of happening and but a very high impact, such as a fire. Fire of your office, or fire of your new factory that you're going to you're installing, or damaging to your impact, damaging hardware when you're transporting into to your office, and damaging on the servers. So there can be a low probability of this happening, but then it's a high impact to the project. You have to reorder your stuff. So those things, those risks, you can actually transfer. Those things you can transfer to an insurance. Transport insurance, or fire insurance, or workers' compensation insurance, medical insurance. So those risks actually you can transfer to another third party who are specialized in obtaining those risks. Then there can be certain activities where there is a high probability of happening, but considerably it's a low impact. Considering when you consider this, then of course those risks you will have to manage, and you will have to mitigate those risks. So same goes to positive side. So the negative side, avoid high risk stuff. So remove activities, or try to avoid those stuff. I mean, basically very high risk stuff, try to not to go into that space. So try to avoid, because it's beyond your you're touching your risk tolerance levels. Then high impact, low probability of happening, transfer to insurance, or some contract level, so that you're fixed on it. And maybe low maybe high probability and low impact stuff. Those things you will have to make actions to mitigate those stuff, such as training, or such as prototyping. Here actually you will be spending many of your time on this space, in managing your risks. So same goes to positive side. High impact and high probability of happening. Then of course here you're trying to avoid, but here you're actually trying to exploit. Maybe you're going to a new market, and there's a high probability of there's a good demand for this product, and a high probability and a high impact, we can get more sales. Then of course you can add resources to it, add more marketing people there, and add a marketing campaign, and start spending and try to exploit that that opportunity that you have in hand on a positive note. If it is a low probability of happening but a high impact, since it's low probability of happening but obviously there is a high impact, then of course it's a bit of a long term, it's a long term shot, maybe you will have to invest certain money, because it's not going to give you a near term return because of low probability of happening, but then you will have to nurture it and bring it to a state where it start giving you an opportunity. Then what you can do is you can start investing. Maybe you can start a joint venture, or investing on it, or have a partner for a more fund for that project. So you can start investing on those things. Here where there is a high probability and a low impact, here high probability of happening, but then there's a low impact, then you can obviously you can nature it or enhance it, enhance it to get that opportunity, harvest it, get that opportunity in. So the other one is actually the accept box, which is here in both part, where the low probability and low impact accept part, where there's a low probability happening and a low impact stuff. So those things from both sides can be accepted. Right. So again, for the negative side, if I take it visually, there's a high probability, high impact like a fire, but then the likelihood or probability of happening is low. You can transfer those risks. When it's very high probability of having high risk stuff, you can, as a team, you can start avoiding those risks as much as possible. And very low risk stuff, very low likelihood of happening, but even if it happens, it's a very low cost impact to us, then of course you can live with it, and you can start accepting and concentrating on activities which is in these boxes. And here are the stuff that need to be more actively controlled, and try to drag them into lower level boxes, to reduce the impact. Got that?
Yes.
Right. So if you map your threats box and the opportunities box in one-on-one, so this is the threat box actually, on the negative risks, so which is there. So you as a project manager will have to concentrate on this part, basically this part. I mean, you have to concentrate on, as a project manager, on this part of the area, because these are, you can sign an agreement with your insurance provider and transfer it out. So thereafter you are concentrating on this part of your risks. So here, same as from your threat landscape, so this is your attention arrow from this side, and from your positive opportunities, high impact and high probability of getting things done, which is here, which you can invest on, say, as I told you, that you will have to exploit by investing more sales people there. So again, the exact opposite will happen. So the high impact and high probability stuff for the opportunities, again, you as a project manager or your senior management will have to concentrate on these areas, which is have a high opportunity for you. So over and all, if you can map like this, this will be your attention, the attention arrow. Okay. Right. So this is the same thing I'm explaining here. So here, box number 1 from the opportunity side is a big win, and uh, these are the low impact but very high probability stuff, and these are the lower stuff you don't bother much, like the accept part of here, you accept those things. And here these are the things that you can hard and get, you can nurture it and bring it to get more benefits, because it's a high impact area but low probability of happening it. Here you can invest and start getting, push it up, those opportunities, push it up into this box. Right. Then very quickly you will have to understand another aspect of risk, the residual risk and the secondary risk. So no matter how much actions that you take on a risk to avoid, again there can be some residual risk remaining. So no matter how much actions that you take, there can be certain amount of risk that is remaining after all the response strategies that you have done. So that is called the residual risk. And sometimes in a proper risk management framework, you actually rank the residual risk also. You give a weightage value for the residual risk also, to see how much of gravity of the residual risk is remaining after the risk treatment. Say you are because of the wedding of that person, of the software developer, you are recruiting the person. Even after that, there can be a residual risk of a certain amount. Maybe although you recruit him and train him, maybe not, there is a risk of that person not being up to the mark of the previous person that you had. So there is a residual risk. There is a risk that is involved in that. That's a remaining risk there. Secondary risk is where you try to take a corrective action, and that can trigger another risk itself. So where risk prevention, you trigger a risk, trigger an activity to avoid a risk of a certain risk, and that can have another cascading risk, another secondary risk involved. So these are two concepts. Once so in performing the actions for your risk, so first you will have to draw this, and your center of attention will be this arrow. And once you take the actions against the risks, you will, as a project manager, you will understand no matter how much actions you take, there can be a residual risk that is involved, there can be a risk involved, and balance risk there. And then sometimes your actions might trigger another risk. Right. So in this, you're planning your risk responses, planning what to do for this risk. Obviously you will have an alternative analysis, either to buy or buy to rent, or either to outsource or either to this thing. Then even when you outsource, then there can be a cascading secondary risks of certain other risk factors coming when you outsource. Even if you recruit, there can be residual risks involved. So you will be doing an alternative analysis. Obviously you will be doing a cost benefit analysis for this. So based upon your cost benefit analysis and alternative analysis, you will be deciding what is the correct risk response for the risk that is in the risk register. And together with that, you as a project manager actually should have a contingency response also. You can have actually a plan B. This is my this is your fallback plan. And you can have a contingency response. I mean, basically this is my first response, and if that did not work, this is my plan B response. I will do this next, my plan B. So you can have your fallback plan, the plan B part also. And you can also the plan B can have a triggering event. If the plan A does not work and this happens, this is when that will trigger. Let's go to the plan B. Say very out of the box thinking, if the new guy who is recruited does not accept the job offer, then let's have the plan B of outsourcing that database function or something like that. So so the triggering point will be he not accepting the job offer. So plan A, the risk response will be to recruit a new database administrator. Plan B will be outsource the database function of the project. Right. So risk response, any risk response will trigger might trigger one of the output will be the change request. I mean, that can be trigger a change request. There can be a cost change in your cost schedule, or there can be a time what you call schedule change in your schedule baseline because of the risk response that you bring in. There sometimes activities have to be delayed, so there can be definitely these risk responses will have an impact on your cost and the schedule. Sometimes maybe the scope, maybe to avoid a cyber security risk, you will have to ask your customer to change some of the requirements that they are given already, which is included in the scope baseline. So there can be a scope changes even. So and then maybe a quality change, maybe to avoid the risk of bugs coming in. Maybe there's a quality change in the quality plan, which we'll be covering in the next class. So so any change, any risk response can trigger out a change request as an output. And as always, all change requests should be go through the integrated change control process that we are discussing in the second session. Right. I was a bit lazy to type in, so I just took a snapshot of this last night. Forget about these sectional references, but then I just want to tell you that how risk responses affects the project plan. I mean, so any risk response can affect your entire the project sub plans that you have in hand. So I mean, basically some other risk responses can changes to the resource loading levels, the resource leveling that we discussed. Maybe you will have to increase your resource leveling or resource smoothing levels that we discussed in our previous sessions. Your scheduling strategy. Some certain risk response can directly affect your cost plan. And maybe their contingency reserves. How the way you track your cost. Maybe you need a more close track of your cost because of the risks. Then, as I told you, the quality approaches. It can certain risk responses can directly affect the approach that the quality that we'll be discussing in the next session. The quality levels that you adhere, the quality standards that you adhere to avoid those risks. Then the resource management plan. Maybe you will have to hire more resources to avoid the risk. The resource allocation, you will have to change the resource allocation. The strategy that whether you're outsourcing consultants or bringing in new guys or from out strategy, your resource hiring strategy will change depending on your risk responses. The procurement plan might change, make or buy decisions where shipment delays are there, whether we can buy it or whether we can buy it locally, or whether there are other alternative actions that we can do. The scope baseline, as I told you, can change. Maybe certain scope of your customer can change to as an agreed upon the risk responses. Your schedule can change. Your cost baseline can change. So I just put this slide because it is important, because risk is one of the crux, one of the key areas in project management which will affect right throughout. To do the risk plan, you will have to access all the elements of the risk of the project management plan, and once you do the risk responses, it also in other way around will affect all the project management elements. Right. As goes to the project document update. The more the updates here, definitely the more the updates on the project documents. Your assumption logs will change, as I told you, with the risk register. Your cost forecast will change. The learns register will change. Your project schedule will start changing. your team assignments and assignments to your team, and the composition of the teams might change depending on their risk response plan. Due to your risk response plan, maybe you need more what do you call it, more cybersecurity experts in your team. So your team compositions might change, uh, as well as your risk register. One of the main after the risk response, definitely the risk register is going to change with the risk responses. So we updating the risk register. We'll be filling up the blank columns in the risk register with the agreed risk responses. What is the chosen response strategy that we have chosen? What is the triggering point for your plan A, plan B, and what are your triggering points? Any budgets, any budgets that you're allocating, you can put your columns on your budgets. Contingency, as I told you, the plan B, the contingency plans, and the risk triggers for the contingency plans, fallback plans, the residual risk, as I told you. Even after doing this, there can be balance risk involved, the residual risk. So we can have open up a new column called the residual risk. What is the residual risk? So much of cybersecurity actions that you take, still there can be a chance of residual 10% or 0.1% of residual risk of a cyber attack coming in, unknown cyber attack coming in. So there will be a residual risk for it. And the secondary risk, because of a risk action that you take, can there be another secondary risk? So all these columns of your risk register is now getting filled after the risk response plan.